It's Chelsea,
It's Nina,
and
and
you're
you're
in
in
the
the
Critics'
Critics
Kingdom.
Kingdom.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another week of the Critics Kingdom. Today, Chelsea and I will be looking at Avalon High, which came out in 2010, based on the book by Meg Cabot, who, is the renowned author of, The Princess Diaries in all of its glory.
Yes.
This was a single novel that she wrote, not part of a series.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they adapted it into a Disney Channel original movie.
Yeah. And we can talk about. I read the book as I guess a tween, tween teen, something in there. So we can talk about later how I felt it went based on the book, but I can get into the Cap right now. I don't know why I said that in French because we're also talking about a British legend, but sure.
Why not? Why not?
Why not? So we start off by meeting Allie Pennington, who is moving into a new house in a new place with her parents, who are two college level medieval literature professors. And that's like their whole thing is they're writing a whole new thesis about King Arthur, and they know everything about it. So Allie now knows everything about like the Arthurian legends and the times and the table and the knights and all of that. She knows about Camelot. And
in all of its glory.
In all of its glory. And her parents, as soon as they arrive, they're like, hey, like, Allie, we want to tell you something. We're actually going to be here for the next like 3 years. And like, we don't know how you feel about that, because basically they've been moving constantly because they're getting new positions as professors like every couple of years. So she's been moving like her whole life. And they're like, you're going to stay here for the next 3 years. And she's like, oh my God, I get to go to Avalon High School for the next 3 years. Like, yes, like, I'm so excited. I'm happy I can make friends and like, blah, blah, blah. And her parents are like, all right, girl. And then the next thing we know, she's at school at Avalon High, and she walks in and she like, also she starts having these visions of like knights riding on a beach. Yeah, this all connects. So that's just important to say.
More on that later.
But yes, she's having these night visions like every night. And then they also start going into the daytime too. But at the beginning, they're at night. And so she's like, I don't know what that's about. But also my parents are medieval professors. So it could just be because I hear about this all the goddamn time. And so she comes into the school and she happens to run into this guy named Will Wagner, who she, funny enough, the day before, she's like a runner. So she like had gone running a day or two after they moved in, and she had ran into this guy at a fountain, and they had like, made eye contact, and her world changed. But then he ran off. Like, so they, never really got to connect. But as soon as she gets to the school, she's like, oh my God. And he's like, oh my gosh, you're water fountain girl. And he's like, I'm Will Wagner. And he's wearing a varsity jacket. So clearly he's a jock. And she's like, oh wow, Will Wagner, like, you're really cool. And so they're connecting, and you're kind of like, ooh, is this romantic? And then the next thing we know, this redhead and this black guy come up, and they're like, they're basically just like, yo, we're Jennifer, I'm his girlfriend. And the guy's like, my name is Lance, and I'm his best friend, and we're a threesome. And so we find out that they've been best friends since like they were little, and they're like a whole little group, and they're all linking arms, and it's kind of weird. But Allie is like, oh, okay, so this is this group. And she tells them like, well, actually my first class is with Mr. Moore, and it's European history. And they're like, oh yeah, we have that too, follow us. And she's like, all right, y'all are weird. And goes into the classroom where Mr. Morton tells them, we're actually going to be studying King Arthur and his table for like the next couple weeks. And so everybody is going to get an assignment to write a paper on a specific aspect of it. So like Jen gets the downfall of the downfall of King Arthur due to his wife Guinevere being in love with Lancelot, his best friend, who is his knight. And Allie ends up getting partnered with this boy named Miles, who is clearly like the like teacher's pet of the class and like weird kid. And they have to write about the Order of the Bear. And it's basically this like secret society that believes that King Arthur's being reincarnated every 1,000 years. And so they get partnered together, and she was like, oh wow, like this is so random. And when Mr. Morton hands her the book, she like starts laughing because she realizes that like it's a book that her parents wrote. And that's why he's like, oh my god, you're the Allie Pennington, your parents are like the like, you know, they know everything about this. And so she's like, yeah, you know, like this is basically me at home every day. And so she ends up like going home, but she keeps having these visions of King Arthur and is like, this is getting weird. And then that night, Miles, the guy that she had met and is partnered with for this paper, comes over and he's like, we need to start working on this paper now. And she's like, dude, we have 2 weeks. Like, why are you here tonight?
3 weeks. It's 3 weeks.
Yeah, 3
He
weeks.
is
Yeah.
overzealous
Like,
as fuck.
And he's like, I like to get started early.
Tell me the damn sense.
They really did it. But they end up, you know, he's literally like, we got to ask your parents because they can't find anything about the Order of the Bear. And of course, her parents are like, we have this old ass book about it, children. And they're like, all right, fine. So they end up learning all about the Order of the Bear and the secret society. And they're like, who believes in this? Blah, blah, blah. And they start really connecting. And Miles also starts getting these like visions himself, like psychic visions where he's like seeing things before they happen. And he sees like Allie trip over herself. So he like immediately goes and gets ice like 2 minutes before it happens. And she's like, how did you know that? And he's like, you don't need to know. And then she's like, okay. And so then the next day they're in class and Allie tells, you know, Mr. Moore, like, hey, like, my parents have this whole book about the Order of the Bear. Would you want to see it because you're like an Arthur buff? And he's like, oh, no, I shouldn't see it. Like, you don't have to bring it in. And she's like, I mean, okay, like, it's just an old dusty book, sir. And he was like, no, don't bring it in, blah, blah, blah. And she starts, like, as they start, like, going through, you know, the books and, like, writing the paper, she starts realizing that, like, maybe this prophecy is real. And she starts thinking that Will Wagner may be King Arthur. And she starts thinking that Mr. Moore may be Merlin because he has like he walks with a cane. So she's starting to see like similarities and she's like, oh my gosh, like this is crazy. This is probably why I'm also having these like weird visions. And then she goes to a party at Will's house after they play like a football game. And she sees Lance and Jen cheating on Will and kissing each other. And this is like the second time, or no, this is the first time she technically sees it. And then she's like, I'm seeing a similarities between Guinevere and Lancelot. So she's starting to really believe it at this point. And then her and Miles end up having like this whole conversation where, because he keeps having these visions, but he won't tell her what they are, but he keeps predicting things. She's like, you have to tell me. And he's like, okay, fine. Like, I'm having these like psychic things and like, I don't know how to explain it and blah, blah, blah. And she's like, oh my God, I think you're Merlin. And he's like, oh my gosh, you think I could be that powerful? And she's like, yeah. So they have a whole conversation about that. And she tells him that who she thinks is like what, you know, corresponding reincarnation. And she's like, I think that Mr. Moore is, you know, Merlin. Or she's like, maybe you're Merlin now, and like Mr. Moore is somebody else. But she's like, you know, I think that, you know, Will is Arthur, Jen, Guinevere, Lance is Lancelot, XYZ. And she also starts getting a little bit worried about Will's stepbrother, who is Marco. And she's like, I think he might be Mordred, who is Arthur's like enemy and who hates Arthur and wants to take him down, all that. Because his stepbrother just keeps walking around being like, don't tell my brother about Lance and Jen. And she's like, okay. And he's also like, and also leave out of my space. And, you know, she just looks at him weird because he keeps invading hers. So after that, she's like trying to figure out whether she should tell Will that his best friend and his girlfriend are cheating on him. And Marco keeps randomly finding her and be like, you can't tell him that, blah, blah, blah. And then she ends up like walking down the hallway one day with Mr. Moore. And he, you know, she thinks that he is, you know, somebody in the universe. So she's like, can you help me protect him? Like, I feel like all this stuff is going wrong and he can't have that right now because we have the big game next week. And like, he needs to win to take us to state and all of that. And then Mr. Moore's like, of course, like, you know, I'm a member of the Order of the Bear, or like, I know about it and like, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, I believe that he's being reincarnated King Arthur and blah, blah, blah. So she's like, okay, cool. And she doesn't want to tell him because she knows that if he finds out similar to King Arthur, it will lead to his downfall where he just becomes listless and depressed and won't fight or help anybody, which is not what King Arthur needs to do. He has to help everybody. So Will is also feeling like a lot of pressure to get into his high school. Like they start running together, so he starts like, telling her everything, all his issues. And he's like, I need to get into college. I need to get this like football scholarship or else like nothing matters. So he just starts having like a lot of bad football days though, and like he doesn't know what to do, and he tells her all the pressure, and so she starts feeling badly for him, and she like kind of wants to tell him that he's Arthur, but again, like that won't freak anybody out that's reasonable, so she can't do that. um and then the next day, her and like Miles has like a psychic vision where he's like, there's a secret page in the like Order of the Bear book that we have. And so they go through it, and they basically find out that the Order of the Bear said that King Arthur gets reincarnated like when there's a meteor shower and a total eclipse at the same time. And they find out that that's happening next week at the day of the big game. So they're like, okay, so Will's about to become Arthur as of next week. So then they're basically in like, we got to figure out everything mad quick to make sure that like he's prepared. And again, she like sees Jennifer and Lance doing what God knows whatever those two are doing together. And the day of the big game, Will is still feeling all the pressure, and he's like trying to figure out his stuff, but he comes and he arrives to the parking lot, and in his like mirror he actually sees Jen and Lance hooking up in the middle of the parking lot, which is wild. So obviously that causes him to take off and like go run to the forest right before the game begins, and Allie finds out with Miles, and so Allie goes and chases after him, and then she meets him and she's like, yo dude, like you're King Arthur, like you can't be doing all this, don't let this get you down. And Will is like, that's a great metaphor, Allie. And he suddenly is like, let's go to the game. So then she was like, well, that's not quite what I meant, but okay, sure. So he goes back to the game, has a bad first quarter, and then halftime, Lance apologizes to him and he forgives him. And he's like, you know what, you and Jennifer do belong together. And Lance is like, yo, thank you, dude. Like, I'm going to actually start protecting you now, because he just had not been this entire time.
Just letting him get tackled on the field. They just throwing Will all over the place.
Literally. And he's like, thanks, bro. So he's like, I'll start protecting you again.
Don't anger your bodyguards, man. That's unwise.
It is. And
so funny.
Once he forgives him, then Will is suddenly like, Allie, we need to talk right now, but like I also need to get back on the field because like it's halftime and we only have like 12 minutes. And he's like, and I don't have my helmet. So then he's like, let me go get my helmet and we'll talk right after the game. And Allie's like, but we need to talk now. And he's like, I'm sorry, and just keeps on running off. And they don't find him like after 5 or 6 minutes. And Lance is like, yo, the game's about to start. Where is dude? And then Allie's like, oh my gosh, I'm worried about him. Let me go find him. And then Miles has another vision, and he basically sees that he's in the drama theater area where they're like putting on a production of Julius Caesar, but like just all the props are up. They're not actually performing it. So they go in there, and that's basically where they find out that Marco was actually his protector. His father was in Order of the Bear and actually passed along the duty of protecting Will to Marco because he had a feeling that Will was Arthur. So we see Marco is injured outside. He tells them all that. And then Mr. Moore, we find out, is actually Mordred, the hated enemy of King Arthur. And poor Will is just trying to figure out like his life because he's like, what is going on and why is my teacher trying to kill me? But Allie like knocks Mr. Moore over and they knock him into like an orchestra pit. So he's like out for a second. And right when they're about to basically like leave and be like, okay, well, we got to take you back to this game, he like pops up, but wearing his like full like knight regalia, and they end up having to fight him, but like fight him in like the night realm, the Camelot realm. I don't know what to call it. Basically the place where she's been having her night visions. That's basically where they fight, where everybody's wearing their full like knight armor and like it's a whole like, like it's literally a drag out like fight for like a good 10 minutes. She ends up defeating him, of course, because we find out that Allie is actually King Arthur. We find this out because she takes the toy sword that they have for, the prop, and it turns into Excalibur in her hands because King Arthur, anything he touches that's a sword, it becomes Excalibur. So she ends up defeating Mr. Moore, and then a police officer ends up taking him away because he's like, why are you knocking over the children and you're a teacher? And he has no response for that. And so he ends up getting taken away by the police officer. And Allie and Will end up, becoming like even more cool. And they're basically like, oh my God, we're like going to be together now. But they're like, well, you need to go to defeat this like play the rest of this game because that's what we need to do. He ends up winning, of course, like the Knights win. And we end with like her parents being like, this seems like this was the night everything was supposed to happen, but nothing happened. There was no fight. There was nothing. And because they're upstairs, they're like up a few bleachers above them at the game as well. They have no idea that any of this just happened or that their daughter is now King Arthur. And then we just see it with Allie in her full like knight regalia on a beach with her horse riding away. And that is how Avalon High ends.
And with that, we will be right back with the review. Get into the review. I should probably start by saying, unlike Chelsea, I did not read this book. And this came out in 2010 when I was like full on like a junior in high school. I was applying to college. Disney Channel original movies were not something that I was watching. So I just had no concept that this thing even existed. So this was my first time viewing the film. And I have to say, I was like, oh, like this, like I watched it and I was like, this is a book I would have enjoyed. This film was actually kind of cool. It's a cool premise. And Chelsea sort of said that I would enjoy it because, Chelsea, that I love my mythologies and King Arthur is one of them. I am all about the Arthurian legends. Not all about them, but I've dabbled for sure. But yeah, it was actually like pretty enjoyable. It seems like they had a real budget for this. The production design was like great. Like I'm confused as to why Descendants looked the way it did. If this could look like this, I just don't understand.
No, it's not. It's really not connecting.
And they shot it in like New Zealand, which again suggests that like you like location. You had dough. Maybe just because it was Meg Cabot's kind of like, although why wouldn't you then just do it theatrically? I don't know. I have some questions, but yeah, it was a pretty enjoyable experience for the most part.
Yeah, I really liked it because, like Nina said, I read the book, but I never watched. The movie came out, we were in high school. Like, we were about to graduate, actually, the next year. So I was also not watching DCOM. So I knew that they had adapted it, but I, like, never watched it because I was like, this is probably just a bastardization of a book that I quite enjoyed when I read it. There were actually a few things that they changed, which we talked about a little bit, because I haven't read the book in quite a few years. So, like, I wasn't sure about what things stayed the same and what things changed. But I think one of the biggest things is that in the book, Allie does not turn into King Arthur. She actually becomes the Lady of the Lake, who is Arthur's protector. And they originally think she's like Ellie of Astolt or something, some other character that's in the legend that like kind of matters, but not really. The Lady of the Lake is far more important. So that was the big switch in the book for her, but Will is still very much Arthur, and his real name in the book is supposed to be Arthur William. So that was the connection there. The book was also a lot darker because it was aimed at teens. So they literally said in the description of this like movie that they had to tone down a lot of it because the book had a lot of fight scenes and it was a lot more violent. And there was also a lot more Arthurian characters involved in the book because you just have more time in a book to get into all of that. So I do recommend the book though. Like if you like Arthurian legends, it was actually I really enjoyed it as a tween, teen, whatever you want to call it. But the movie was actually quite good. Like I was pleasantly surprised, and we both really liked that they actually turned her into Arthur. And I think that was actually a very good choice made on their end to do that because you don't see that very often. And I think it was a nice like twist that I don't.
Yeah, it was a pleasant surprise.
Yeah,
for sure.
So I do think like that part was really cool. But I know one thing that we had actually talked about was like Nina. I remember you said that like for you really liked the movie, the animated film Quest for Camelot.
Yeah,
and how that really like spurned you, like made you really want to like look more into the Arthurian legends as a whole. So you actually know quite a lot about it than I think like your average probably American does because we don't Like, we don't learn about it here. Like, if I'm honest, like, that's just not a thing. So,
Yeah, and it tracks
yeah.
that it's not a thing. Like, it makes sense because it isn't entirely like this is a British. It's like it's an Anglo-Saxon medieval legend. Like, there's no reason for it to permeate anywhere else, like in the world, except for places that have like deep contact with it. And in particular, I think because as we were watching it, I was thinking to myself, I was like, why did I get so into King Arthur, or like why did I have like such access to it? Because I watched Quest for Camelot when I was a kid, and I was like interested in it as a concept, like the Knights of the Round Table. But I think what actually happened was that I watched it, and my dad was very instrumental in my movie watching as a kid. You know, like blockbuster trip every week sort of situation. And he would like sit down and watch movies with me, and he like essentially was like, "Oh, you like Knights, or you think Knights of the Round Table are cool?" And he showed me like live action VHSs of like King Arthur, right? Like I remember watching kind of like live action versions of like Hercules. You know what I mean? Like watching those when I was a kid that my dad just had. And I was thinking about it and I realized, oh, right. But like when my parents were born in Jamaica, like they were both British subjects. You know what I mean? Like my dad probably grew up learning about the Arthurian legends in school. So that is why my dad had such access to it. My dad like knew so much about it to begin with. And that's why like I know about it and had a chance to be like interested in it, and was watching Merlin when it was on in Britain like illegally before it came over to America. Um, but yeah, it's an interesting thing to sort of think about, like because we were talking about just the fact that there was a period of time. It's not this period of time. By 2010, I think the medieval lore wasn't necessarily like on and popping for the American child. Um, or European medieval lore wasn't like on and popping for the American child. But there was a period of time, I think, when we were like essentially like maybe early 90s, where it's when you got like Princess Bride and Robin Hood Men in Tights and Quest for Camelot, like, and Kid in King Arthur's Court, and like all of these just like medieval films were a thing, or there was interest in medieval lore as children's media. And I think that stopped. And by the time this came out, like this is, I think, a little bit before Merlin gets to American audiences. And even then, like it was super niche. Like it was on Sci-Fi. I think it wasn't even on like BBC America. So like it's it's just like we watched it and we enjoyed the film, but and it seemed like the type of film where they would have made more if it had done well. And my inclination is that it did not do well.
Yeah,
at all.
I looked at the Wikipedia. I think they said they only had like 3.8 million viewers, which is like not Disney numbers. If
They're like, we're
honest.
better than this. We're better than this.
Yeah, if we're being honest. So I feel like, that definitely probably had a lot to do with it. And I know you and I were like kind of talking about, why we feel like this didn't do as well, considering that it was actually quite engaging and a pretty decent like adaptation from a book. I would say.
Which again makes me feel like all of the best DComs are book adaptations.
Outside of Frenemies.
Well, that was I don't know what that was. We don't talk about that. I want to forget that. But yes, you are right. That maybe that's the exception to prove the rule. Maybe we'll live in that space.
But yeah, no, I do think it was very interesting because even in thinking about who it was for, the book when it came out was very much like YA, like teen. And the subject matter did reflect that. And I actually feel like this would have done better had it been a freeform type of series.
Then ABC Family.
What used to be what at this point was ABC Family, but it's now freeform. I think it would have done much better. as a like miniseries, movie, whatever, because it could have gotten an older audience. Because I do feel like we would have been the main audience at that point, like at 16. But I feel like people our age would have watched it
Yeah,
because,
and it was at that, like, it was when Pretty Little Liars like like that was like one of the first, maybe the first or second season of Pretty Little Liars was like 2010.
I think the first
Um,
season.
yeah, because I remember it came out like middle of high school. I didn't watch it like that, but I didn't watch it at all. I didn't watch Pretty Little Liars, but I know that like that was like a big thing, and we were really into the way it seems like teenagers have been for a little while, like really into like the dark teen stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And this could have lived in, like, I could have imagined this being like a really dope mini series
Mm-hmm.
on ABC Family that people would have been like super into. Um, and like trying to figure out like who's who. Like they probably would have had to, and they just could have like done a lot more interesting things that, from what you've told me and from what I've looked up, like it seems like the book had the space to do.
Mm-hmm.
And also when you were talking about this, you were saying that, and I really agree with it, that like this is almost sort of too high concept for the Disney Channel audience, which is, or the Disney Channel original movie audience, but Disney Channel audience, which is like 7 to 11 or
Yeah.
6 to 11. You know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah.
too, because you have to assume that they have a knowledge of King Arthur, which they probably don't, because they're American children. And then on top of that, it's just like there are no like younger kids. There are no, it's living in, a much higher place, a much more sort of literary place, and I think that age range is not even like it's not that whether or not they can do it, 'cause, like, they can engage with it, of course, and there are definitely kids who would want to engage with it, but I think most kids that age would prefer not to, or they would watch other things before they watch that.
No, and I would actually completely agree with you. I think that what I'm in my mind most comparing it to in terms of the audience is Twitches, where I feel like they're going for the same, which is the older audience, like the, let's say, I don't know, 12 to 15. Um, but I feel like the big thing with Twitches is that it had two people that we were already familiar with. So it
Yeah,
had Tia and Tamara, who kids have already seen because at that point we had all watched Sister, you'd seen clips, whatever. You were familiar with them.
yeah,
And it was a pretty simple concept. Like it was
yeah,
just very much they're twin witches.
yeah. Yeah,
And
it
like
wasn't, yeah,
it wasn't complicated, and also they were making the lore in the movie, so you didn't
yeah,
have to have a basic anything for you to
yeah,
get it. But yes, I think that's actually one of the biggest barriers for this one is that you really need to have a basis of something for King Arthur, even if maybe you don't know Mordred or the Lady of the Lake. You know King Arthur, you probably know Lance, and you probably know Guinevere, the names.
I'm
And
not gonna lie, I'm quite upset that Morgana doesn't show up in this. I was like, what the hell? Like, Morgana's great, but that's aside.
but yeah, I feel like like your average 7 or 8 year old American kid is not most likely going to know any of that because they
Yeah,
haven't even come into contact with this would be probably their first contact with it.
yeah.
And it doesn't explain much. So
They really don't give you, like, they don't. I don't even think they explain like what Camelot was.
no,
I don't
they
think that
don't.
ever happens. They just assume
They
you know what
don't. They do
Camelot
not
is.
at
It's
all.
like, or like the Knights of the Round Table. Like they don't. They don't. It would be like if they had literally put like the first 5 minutes of it just like giving us a basic understanding of like the Arthurian legend.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, so my parents studied this thing, and you could have made it like cute and funny. Okay, so my parents are like, they're professors and they're kind of weird. They're really super into this thing, right? Here's this dude. His name's Arthur, and he's the king. Like you could have made it super fun. But yeah, that's not what happens. So
Yeah.
I can understand what I really do understand why it didn't do so well, and why maybe this was just the an inappropriate platform for this particular story.
Yeah, but I do think it honestly was to the detriment of the actual movie because the movie was quite good. Like I enjoyed it. I was like, oh wow, like you guys actually tried. Also, shooting in the moment that they started, it starts with the knights on the beach. And then
It
like
really
going over
does.
hills. And as soon as we got there, I was like, this is giving me New Zealand. This is giving me Hobbit. Like, and then we looked it up and it was shot in New Zealand because I was like, yeah, like this is like you do those shots when you are not in the US.
Yeah, yeah. When there's
So,
land. You know what I
right.
mean? When,
So I
like,
appreciated that they really went for the gusto. I just don't. I think like we've been saying, it just wasn't the right audience. It should have been on a different network. And I think it might have done better, or it should have just been recalibrated differently. Because I do think this would have been a dope miniseries.
it
Like,
would have been like, and it would have been like ABC's Family they would have gotten mad views for that. You know what I mean? Like, we'd be like, all right, like, cool, like, let's just see what it is. They could have done like a Thursday 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. slot for
mm-hmm.
like 4 weeks, 5 weeks. Like, we would have been about it.
You
So
know,
that's a
I actually
missed
don't think
opportunity.
they've done any teen limited series. Now that I'm thinking about it,
Exactly. That's why I think it would have worked real well. Yeah, that's why I think it would have worked really well. I think we would have been down, and they would have been able to build a situation of advertising of like, oh, like this, we like catch the last episode like that. Like they would have been able to build something really interesting around it. I actually think if they had had the foresight to do
yeah,
that.
no, I agree. I do think. I mean, maybe one of these days somebody else will adapt it. The book is now over 10 years old, so it could happen. I guess the movie is now 10 years old.
Yeah.
11 years old. The book came out in '05, so the book is quite, it's been a minute.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know. Hopefully somebody will adapt. I think it still would be a really cool miniseries. I really want somebody to do it, but like obviously,
Hell, maybe I'll adapt it. Maybe
honestly,
I'll do
it.
that.
Make
Like,
it,
I
make it
actually,
fun.
yeah, I'm gonna put that out there, like, right now, like, copyright.
You would really like the book. Like,
I'm
I really
starting
want
on
you to
those
read the
right
book.
purchases. Yeah, I'm starting on those rights purchases right now to anyone who's listening.
Yeah.
Just so
You
that
will
I've
really
said
enjoy
that
the
on
book.
record. Yeah, I might pick it up, like, in the way that, like, I feel like I'll enjoy it the way that, like, I enjoy A Wrinkle in Time.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Or like how I reread The Giver every now and then. Don't watch that movie. I didn't watch that movie.
No,
but
do not watch that.
I can tell
watched
you
it.
not to watch that movie.
I watched that movie. Don't watch it. What an abomination. But yeah, I do think, like, shout out. I would like to give just a little shout out to Miss Meg Cabot. She has written so many books that I quite enjoyed as a young preteen, young teen. And she deserves her place in the YA, like Hall of Fame, because she was
Yeah.
really doing it for the girls between Princess Diaries. I also loved her story, All American Girl, which I think was supposed to be adapted at one point, but never quite happened. This one was really good. Like, she's good. She's good. She deserves.
Yeah, I never like. I don't think I read much Meg Cabot. Like I really don't think I did. But I do. I remember like she exists in my own. Like she still exists in my mind as like a queen of the young adult genre, if for no other reason, just because like when you say her name, like I see those books immediately. There's no I'm just like, oh yeah, like I see like the Princess Diaries like series and the crowns on the covers
On
and
the
like all of that stuff.
covers?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
immediately. So yeah, for sure. She did her thing, and she made very enjoyable and I think very empowering books for young teenagers, and like I celebrate anybody who does that, because like
And
the kids
focused on
need it.
teen girls, which
There was a lot of focus on teen girls too, which is always
I really enjoyed. But yes, so shout out to her and the YA novelists out there. So much to us when we were younger. But yeah, I think this one, it was a good movie. They also had a lot of like very random music in it that was really intense. Because they were just like coming out of nowhere, and you're just like, what? Like, they started playing Battlefield by Jordan Sparks, and I was like, okay, like, this is an interesting choice. And also, Disney normally doesn't do like actual known recordings, so I was shocked.
And not only did they record, like, it's on Disney Plus, which means that they bought the like licensing to that.
She must have been on their record label. Like, that's
I believe that.
She must have been on. I think they owned Hollywood back then, Hollywood Records. I wouldn't be surprised if she was on Hollywood Records, and that's why.
That's also fair.
But yeah, that was kind of a shocker, because they stopped doing that after like 2004 or 5.
Yeah, they were like, we're not, no more.
No more.
We do
But-
everything in-house?
Yes, exactly. We own our own supply chain.
Yo, Disney is like, let me not. Let me just not mark myself for anything.
They
Because
own their
they
own
will
supply
come,
chain.
like, they will come get me. They will come get me. So let me just hush my mouth on it.
Do we think that they wear Mickey Mouse heads when they come get you in the middle of the night?
Yo, and like the white gloves.
Yes.
Yes. I'm going with that. Yes, they definitely did.
We are fools.
We are guys. It's oh Lord. We have way too much fun watching these movies. Like we are fools and we are children. Like that is 110% the case.
Now I just imagine.
Oh god, that was a fun trip. I hope that you enjoyed going down that trip with us. That was excellent.
If the podcast ever stopped for a longer period of time and you're like,
yeah, exactly. If you never hear from us again, that's exactly what happened. Okay, that's what happened.
They Mickey Moused us, guys.
They Mickey Mouse. Oh god. But yeah, it's a good film. There isn't much like. It's not a very like sort of complex. It's just like everything about it is like all of the things about Camelot.
Mm-hmm.
For the ideas of like leading well
Mm-hmm.
and having a group of what's the word like chivalrous and honorable and dutiful people around you to help you lead well, and that there are people that would rather see that not happen.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to like know who to trust, know who not to trust, that. But like those are all such common tropes and everything that it's not particularly standoutish.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense. In this film, there's not much about the film that's serious or that feels serious. And it's entertaining. It's just I think the thing about this film is that like it lives in a weird place for me because you do watch it and you're like, this could have been something.
Yeah.
Sort of much more substantial and much more gripping. But like it was literally just a miss. Like it was literally just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Yeah. On the wrong network.
Yeah.
And that's where it was.
Agree with that. I think that's actually a great way to phrase it, where it's just like it just had so much potential. And I actually think that for the platform they were on, they met the potential. It did quite well, or it was quite well done. But yeah, it was just not. It didn't go to the best place it should have.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess with that, Chelsea, would you show this to your children?
Yeah, I would actually probably be like, if you guys, I would probably recommend they read the book, and then I would actually show this one. Would I actually go out of my way and be like, you guys should watch this? I don't know. I would definitely give them the book when they're like 11 or something and be like, they made a decom about it and it's actually not half bad. I don't know if this would not, the problem is, I think it's what we said though, this would have to not be their first ever experience with King Arthur though. Yeah. So that's why I think the book is like a better way to start. And then, normally when you read a book and there's an adaptation, you typically want to watch it. So I feel like that's the way it would go for me. What about you?
I think we'll watch Merlin. That's how I feel. Like I think I don't. Like it's like I think we'll watch Quest for Camelot when they're little, and then we'll watch Merlin. Like that will just be the way that we do it, and that will be my way of introducing my kids to this thing that I got from their grandfather. Because I don't really. I've just seen this legend. I haven't read the book, and I do think I would enjoy the book. But I've seen this legend done better. Mm-hmm. Not to say that this is not a decently done film, but I've seen it conceived better.
Yeah.
And more appropriately, and I've seen it be more fun. You know what I mean? Like, I think that this isn't as like it's fine, but Merlin is a lot more fun than this, you know? And I enjoy, and Merlin has like a longer, it's just expanded. They like take their time because it's a series, obviously, but you know, it's expanded. It's from the perspective of of the wizard. So there's magic. There's also not enough magic in this. You know, like
Yeah.
they don't, it's not a very magical thing. And it's
It's
like,
just
that's
him
part
being
of the,
psychic.
and that's part of the charm of King Arthur is the magic of it. And you know, it's him being psychic. And again, they don't have Morgana. And it's like, that's part of the magic of it. So, or yeah, the part of the charm of the legends is the magic in the legends. So I think that you get more of that just in other places. And I can't, unless my kids get super into King Arthur legends, I can't imagine that this would be something that I'm like, you should watch.
Yeah, I also feel like probably by that time somebody else will have come out with some version of it that might be more now. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
just because of like how we all know how the entertainment industry works, like it'll everything doubles back around. So I'm sure within the next like 10 years there will be another thing based upon King Arthur's court. Just
yeah.
because.
Just because
Just
they can.
because.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I see that as well. I think I just have I have an affinity with the book, so I automatically am like, I would definitely want you to read the book, and then I didn't mind this, so I would be like, sure, if you want to watch the
Yeah.
movie too. But I think mine is specifically coming out of the affinity I have with the book more than the movie.
Which makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't have that sort of tie to this, that like emotional and nostalgic tie to this. So I'm like
Yeah.
and my emotional nostalgic tie is to other things. It's to
Right.
Merlin.
Right.
You know what
That
I
are
mean?
set
So
at the same time period.
exactly.
Right.
So it's like I'd rather just deal with that. I also don't necessarily understand like the implication, the idea that in the second coming of King Arthur, like he would be in America and that America is essentially Camelot because in this homeboy wants to be president. Like that is hilarious to me. And like I don't need my kids walking away with that thought in their head. Like we have long realized that America is not the city on the hill that it has told everybody it is, including itself.
And what I was telling Nina is that King Arthur's descendants probably did come here on the Mayflower.
And that actually
Which
explains
is actually
the whole
the biggest
motherfucking
American
lie.
experience.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Fair enough.
I wouldn't be surprised.
But I guess with that, we will catch you guys next week.
Bye. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of The Critics Kingdom. Don't forget to follow us on Spotify and SoundCloud so you can stay up to date, as well as interacting and letting us know what you guys think on social media. You can find us on Twitter at Critics Kingdom and on Instagram at The Critics Kingdom. We're excited to talk to you again next week.